Absolutely. Here's a full, cinematic, and emotionally gripping story based on your title. I've written it in one complete part, aiming for roughly 1,800 words, with natural suspense, emotional depth, and viewer engagement cues included. The boardroom was silent, bathed in the cold glow of late-night fluorescent lights, the kind that make every polished surface gleam and every shadow look darker than it was. At the center, sprawled across the plush leather chair, the CEO of Meridian Enterprises, Jonathan Hale, feigned sleep. His usual commanding presence, the kind that bent people's wills and expectations to his own, was now a deliberate mask of vulnerability. He wasn't really tired. He wasn't really asleep. Tonight, he had a plan, a test of human decency he was almost ashamed to admit he had devised. In his life of wealth, power, and constant scrutiny, he had begun to wonder, were there still people left who acted with kindness simply because it was the right thing to do? He was about to find out. Before we dive deeper, if you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, pause for a moment, like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this remind us that even in the coldest, hardest places, the human heart still beats with warmth. The soft clack of shoes on marble echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. Michael Turner, a single dad and the night janitor for Meridian Enterprises, pushed open the boardroom door, his small frame carrying the weight of exhaustion, responsibility, and pride. Life hadn't been kind to Michael. He had fought for every paycheck, every scrap of dignity, and every chance to give his son, Tyler, a life that wasn't defined by struggle. Working nights at a corporate tower that glittered with opulence was never supposed to be glamorous, but it kept food on the table and hope alive. Michael didn't expect admiration, recognition, or applause. He expected to clean, do his job quietly, and leave unnoticed. Tonight, however, the universe had other plans. Jonathan's eyes, though half closed, tracked Michael as he moved across the room, swiping a microfiber cloth over the polished conference table. He watched the janitor's precise movements, the way his hands worked with both efficiency and care. Something about the quiet dignity of his labor struck a chord Jonathan hadn't felt in years. Jonathan had always assumed that people who served him, people who operated behind the scenes, were either self-interested or invisible. He had lived surrounded by yes men and polished veneers. But the whisper he heard next would shatter his assumptions. As Michael finished with the table and knelt to adjust a fallen chair, he murmured softly, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but clear to Jonathan. "Hang in there, buddy. We've got this." The CEO froze. That whisper was directed not at him, but at an empty chair across the room, a chair Jonathan hadn't noticed before, small, worn, and childlike. His heart constricted as realization hit him. Michael wasn't speaking to the boardroom or even to a phantom. He was talking to a memory, a picture taped to the wall of his son Tyler, smiling through a scraped knee that had barely healed. This man carried the weight of his life, his past, his struggles, and still spoke words of hope and encouragement, to someone else, to a child who looked up to him, depending on him for love. Jonathan's breath caught. He had seen people at their worst, angry employees, dishonest business partners, deceitful investors, but here was a man whose life was unglamorous, uncelebrated, and yet brimming with compassion. The CEO's cold, calculating mind raced. Could this be pure goodness? The next hour unfolded like a cinematic awakening. Jonathan continued to pretend to sleep, though. Every nerve in his body was alive, observing Michael's movements. Michael emptied trash cans, polished surfaces, straightened chairs, and occasionally paused to glance at the photo of Tyler on the conference table. Every motion, every glance, exuded care, not just for the objects in his work, but for the invisible world that mattered more, the heart and soul of the people he loved. Jonathan's mind, used to cold calculations, began to feel something unfamiliar, something he had not allowed himself to feel in years: humility. He realized that the power he had amassed, the billions, the titles, the respect he had enforced with fear and intellect, meant nothing compared to the quiet heroism in front of him. This janitor, a man society often ignored, was the embodiment of courage, resilience, and love in its purest form. Hours passed, and the night deepened. The city outside glittered with the artificial promises of success, while inside, a different kind of miracle was quietly unfolding. Jonathan had to know more. He had to break the pretense, yet he hesitated. How does one confront genuine kindness without shattering it with suspicion or cynicism? Finally, when Michael straightened up, wiped his brow, and whispered once more, "I love you, kiddo." "Sleep tight." Jonathan could no longer contain himself. He cleared his throat, and the sound startled Michael so much he nearly dropped the mop. The janitor spun around, eyes wide, heart hammering, expecting reprimand, or maybe mockery. Instead, he saw a man he had never expected. Jonathan Hale, CEO, billionaire, powerful, and yet, vulnerable, human, and genuinely moved. Jonathan's voice was low, rough with emotion. I've been watching you, Michael." Michael froze, unsure what to say. Fear, pride, and humility battled inside him. He had never sought recognition, never wanted attention, and certainly never expected the CEO to be here, observing, waiting for a moment like this. Jonathan stepped closer, removing the mask of authority that had defined him for decades. "I've never understood people like you. I've never taken the time. But tonight, I see you. I see what you do, what you sacrifice, the love you carry, and I realize how little I've truly understood about life." Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to explain that this was just a job, just a responsibility, just a father's love. But the words seemed inadequate. What could he say that wouldn't sound like boasting or excuse? His life had been quiet, unremarkable by society's standards, yet tonight, in the eyes of a man who had everything, it felt monumental. For the first time in his life, Jonathan's wealth and power didn't matter. For the first time, he understood that greatness is not measured by titles or money, but by the heart one shows in small, unseen ways. He offered Michael something rare: respect, acknowledgement, and perhaps even friendship. "I don't know if you've ever been offered a second chance, Michael," Jonathan said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "But I want to give you one. Not just a promotion, not just recognition, but a chance to shape something bigger. Something that honors the goodness in you." Michael's mind spun. He had always been wary of people like Jonathan, men of influence and charm who spoke of opportunities with hidden agendas. But tonight felt different. Tonight, it was genuine. The years of struggle, the nights of exhaustion, the relentless worry about Bill's and Tyler's future, all of it seemed to converge in this one defining moment. Tears pricked at Michael's eyes. He looked at Jonathan, and for the first time, he felt the possibility of being seen. Not as a janitor, not as a single dad struggling to make ends meet, but as a man capable of more than he had ever dreamed. And then, Jonathan said something that would linger in Michael's heart forever: "Never underestimate the power of small acts. You've taught me tonight that what we consider ordinary can be extraordinary. Don't ever forget that." The words, simple yet profound, reverberated in the room long after Michael nodded, unable to speak. There was a shift, an invisible transformation, not just in the boardroom, but in both of their lives. Michael returned to his mop and bucket, but he carried himself differently, with quiet pride and unshakable dignity. Jonathan sat back, no longer pretending, feeling a gratitude and humility he had almost forgotten existed. The night ended, the janitor clocked out, and the city lights began to dim as dawn approached. Outside, Michael looked at the skyline with his usual sense of determination, but tonight, hope felt larger, more tangible. Jonathan, for the first time in decades, felt the pulse of life not dictated by power or wealth, but by simple, raw humanity. This story isn't just about wealth meeting humility. It's about the unnoticed heroes around us, the people who whisper courage, who work tirelessly, who love deeply, even when no one is watching. It's about the awakening of those who have everything, realizing that the world's true value is measured not in possessions but in compassion. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even the smallest acts of love and kindness can change lives, please take a moment to engage with this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let this story inspire more people to act with heart, even when no one is looking. Before you leave, comment below with a small act of kindness you've witnessed or given. Let's spread this ripple of humanity and show that genuine goodness still exists. Michael's life didn't change overnight in tangible ways. He still cleaned, he still worried about Tyler, he still fought for every day. But inside, everything had shifted. He walked taller, smiled brighter, and carried hope like a shield. Jonathan's empire would continue to thrive, but inside him, a quiet revolution had taken root. He began to see the world not as a battlefield of power and control, but as a tapestry of unseen sacrifices, of courage, of love. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan quietly ensured Michael's life improved. Without fanfare, he provided opportunities for growth, small gestures of respect, and a subtle mentorship that elevated Michael's confidence and security. But the greatest gift of all was the acknowledgement, the validation that life's quiet heroes deserved to be seen. By the end, both men had learned something priceless, that humility can awaken the hardened, and that unnoticed acts of love can inspire the unlikeliest hearts. And in that revelation, the story of a CEO pretending to sleep and a single dad janitor whispering to his son became a testament to the enduring, transformative power of compassion. Checkmark story complete. Approximately 1,800 words, cinematic, emotionally engaging, with suspense, depth, and 2 viewer engagement moments. If you want, I can also craft a perfect YouTube SEO description with keywords, hashtags, and disclaimer for this story so it's ready to post and attract maximum engagement. Do you want me to do that next?